So the last two codexes have given us some enormously tanky Terminators, but who are the hardest Terminators to take down? Is it the Death Guard Blightlords or the Dark Angels Deathwing? Let's run a few numbers and try and find out. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're focusing on Terminators and doing a little bit of math hammer on some fairly equivalent units, the elites of the Death Guard and the Deathwing respectively. Despite both having death in their name, both of them are ludicrously hard to make die. In the video we'll just talk about what makes them quite so tough, compare the durability for a couple of different units, talk about some of the other ways that they can be made tougher within their codexes, and then compare some of the numbers on those. So what is it that makes the Terminators quite so tough? For the Death Guard, the Terminators that are toughest point for point in the decks are the Blightlords. They have the same defensive profile as the Death Shroud, who of course pay a bit of a premium for being far more dangerous in melee. For this video we're not going to focus on damage output, and more sort of see the extra points that you spend making them Death Shroud or giving them fancy close combat weapons as a different sort of upgrade. I'm going to focus on the durability of the cheaper forms of their units, and then you could always add a fair few extra points to make them ludicrously killy as well. In any case, for the Death Guard, the Blightlord Terminators are 40 points per model, and they've got 3 pretty massive defensive upgrades compared with standard Terminators. They're Toughness 5, keep a 4+ invul save, and they're also -1 damage due to disgustingly resilient. Toughness 5 is going to make things like bolters just really inefficient against them, a 4+ invul really helps put paid to heavy anti-tank weapons, and -1 damage makes the middle ground, things like damage 2 weapons such as overcharged plasma, only half as effective as they should be. At base they come with a combi bolter and a bile sword. They will make you -1 toughness in close combat as well. They can be given some fancy close combat gear, but on balance they're still a lot tougher defensively than they are good at dealing damage. On the other hand we have the Deathwing Terminators. With their most standard loadout they're 38 points per model, armed with a Power Fist and Storm Bolter. They're Toughness 4, 3 wounds, 2 up save and a 5+ invul. But to be honest, not having Toughness 5 doesn't really matter at all when they have Inner Circle, which means they can only be wounded on force by any weapon, no matter how high strength it is. It's permanent transhuman physiology all the time, and makes them crazily resistant to high strength weapons. On top of that, you can also apply that to a cheaper version of Terminators, the Relic Terminators. They can be armed with a Lightning Claw and Storm Bolter for just 34 points, and these cheaper Terminators actually have a similar sort of damage output to the Blightlords, very good at dealing with hordes both at range and in melee. So if we fire a bunch of guns at them, let's see who comes out on top. So first of all, here we have the mass of 6 Blightlord Terminators versus 7 Relic Deathwing Terminators. They're pretty much the same points cost, 238 on the Deathwing versus 240 on the Blightlord side. As you can see, despite the excellent upgrade of permanent transhuman physiology and having an entire extra Terminator in the squad, the Blightlords still come out on top. This table shows the number of hits from each of these weapons that will be needed to wipe out the entire unit. Frankly though, while the Blightlords still win, all of these numbers are pretty excessive. First up we have lasguns, which the Relic Deathwing do just win out against by a little bit, though to be honest I wouldn't say that this is particularly meaningful, as lasguns just aren't going to be an efficient way to down these units, and having a small durability buff against small arms isn't really going to help all that much. The Blightlords are significantly tougher against bolt rifles, being Toughness 5, decently better against heavy bolters and plasma guns due to only counting damage 2 weapons as being damage 1, though the Deathwing aren't too far behind against the overcharged plasma, due to it only wounding them on 4s. Against Thunderhammers as well, the Blightlord Terminators win out, I think mainly due to every single Thunderhammer hit will kill a Relic Deathwing Terminator if it comes through, but you'll need 2 hits each to kill the Blightlords as they reduce the damage by 1. Finally though, against the very heaviest anti-tank fire, things like las cannons and multi-melters, it's pretty much an even draw. The Deathwing is still only wounded on 4s, but the -1 damage and 4+ invul of the Blightlords help them catch up. Overall though, compared with these very cheap Relic Terminators, point for point the Blightlords do slightly win on the durability contest. Of course though, the Relic Terminators aren't the only way that we could field Deathwing. If we went for a slightly different flavour and opted for Thunderhammers and Storm Shields, these are the numbers that we'd get. Just for ease of calculation, I've kept the same number of Blightlords for 6 of them, and the equivalent points would buy you the slightly awkward number of 5.6 Thunderhammer and Storm Shield Terminators. These numbers are only really useful for comparing the two. I would say that these two units are far more balanced in terms of durability. The Terminators have now acquired a 2+ save with a +1 from the Storm Shield, and also a 4+ invul. Of course you do get less of them as a trade-off. From the numbers though, now it's the Blightlords that slightly win against the lasguns, though the Deathwing Terminators pull significantly ahead against AP-1 weapons, due to them still saving on a 2+ with those storm shields. Heavy bolter fire is just going to be a bit of a joke against either one of these units. The Blightlords still have the lead against overcharged plasma with their -1 damage, and the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield Terminators going down to their invul with it, and they're pretty much equally durable against Thunderhammer hits and las cannon fire, both of their many durability buffs pretty much evening out. Obviously you are quite radically changing the composition of the unit here. The Thunderhammer Terminators lose all shooting, but they're far better against heavies in melee. To be honest, I am quite surprised at just how well balanced these two are against each other, even though they do of course take obscene amounts of fire and damage to try and bring down. Of course though, that's very much not the end of making these Terminators more tanky, as if that sheer resilience wasn't enough on its own, there's plenty of other things to make them even worse within the codex. Both of them can get a 6+ feel no pain, either from a Plague Surgeon or an Apothecary, and they can also heal injured models. On the Deathwing side, perhaps one of the strongest buffs is getting a -1 damage buff from the Pennant of Remembrance on a Deathwing Ancient. You will have to bring a character that's either 85 to 100 points, but in that way you can basically give a unit disgustingly resilient on top of their already very strong buffs. If you upgrade to a Chief Apothecary with Selfless Healer, you can resurrect one from the dead each turn. They can gain objective secured through their special Vanguard detachment, which of course is really powerful on very durable units like this. They can use Line Unbreakable to limit enemy melee attacks, and you could even potentially invest in a Landspeeder Dark Shroud for 130 points, making them -1 to hit. The Dark Shroud can potentially be shot directly though, which maybe does limit its impact a little bit. There aren't quite so many extensive options with the Death Guard. Their codex isn't quite as big as the Space Marine one after all, but they do have a very powerful option in the Miasma of Pestilence, which gives them a -1 to hit both at range and in melee. If you really wanted to double down on psychic buffs for them, you could also give them +1 toughness from Putrescent Vitality as well. Chuck them both on one Plague Caster, and for 100 points you've got a way to make them even tougher. Theoretically, if you wanted to stop them even being shot for a turn, you could potentially try and make them untargetable with Cloud of Flies, though it would cost you a crazy 4 CP. A very silly powerful move, but I'm not sure that most people will want to spend all of their command points this way. If we each allow them an 100-point support character, I've chosen a Sorcerer with Miasma and Putrescent Vitality for the Blightlords, and I've taken the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield Deathwing and given them the Pennant of Remembrance. Not unexpectedly, this really does make the numbers even sillier. In particular, going to Toughness 6 means that now 6 Blightlord Terminators would take around 860 lasgun hits to bring down. 6s to wound and 1s to save really do add up fast. Across most of the categories, it's a very slight win for the Blightlords over the Deathwing, though I wouldn't really say that there's much of a meaningful damage difference apart from on the Thunderhammer, which the Deathwing win against the Blightlords in quite a big way, now they've gained -1 damage. The bottom line is that neither of these units are going anywhere, and if you took the Apothecary or the Plague Surgeon, then they could have a 6+ feel no pain even on top of all this. I'd say perhaps if they are allowed additional support characters, the Deathwing are probably going to win, as Apothecary's healing models from the dead is really good for durability. It's no surprise that they remain such a staple in Space Marine lists. The numbers here are just truly ridiculous though. It really is crazy to think that you'd have to have over 50 las cannon shots to try and bring down a 250 point unit, or around about 100 shots of overcharged plasma. So overall, in terms of durability, I'd say it's very close between the Death Guard and the Deathwing Terminators. On the raw stats, both are ludicrously tough, and one or the other only seems to win out on very small margins on certain weapon types. So base stats are very similar. If you include buffs, I'd say that the Dark Angels Deathwing are likely to win slightly. Apothecary Resurrection and that Pennant of Remembrance going off automatically just beat out the slight unreliability of psychic spells for me. Plus Deathwing Terminators having the opportunity to get Obsec is really quite powerful. I think in a lot of games it might be more intelligent to try and play around these guys. They're not all that fast and could potentially be screened or outmaneuvered. Unless you can bring most of your army to bear on a unit in one turn, I think you're likely to struggle to bring them down. So look forward to reading your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, and certainly let me know if you can think of anything else to do some math hammer on. I've quite enjoyed getting back to a comparative numbers video. Finally, if you have been enjoying my videos, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all this content does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, such as seeing certain new videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the Auspex Tactics prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.